I'm on a week-long camping trip in Costa Rica, and I rented this FJ Cruiser. Pretty awesome rig. It's got a rooftop tent on there, and this is my first experience with a rooftop tent. Figure I'll kind of go ahead and give you my thoughts and my perception about rooftop tents, what they are, the benefits, and the downsides, and what my final verdict is. All right, so this is a TJM Ulara. I don't know the brand. I'll have to look it up when I get back home. I am just out here shooting this video on the fly, so I didn't do any research on this, but I can tell you this is a very high quality tent. The seams, the material is super thick. Everything is very well built. It is solid. It has kept me dry in several nights of rain and several big downpours. They say there's space for two. I guess all these tents are typically the same. Telescoping ladder, same setup. And inside, as I said, looks like your typical setup. 4 windows, rain flies that come up, they can all open when the weather's nice. Got your mosquito netting, pockets. This mattress is actually very comfortable. I'm not sure how thick it is, maybe like 3 or 4 inches, but it is very comfortable. And I have slept several good nights in here. I mean, I have slept in here. I've felt warm, secure, dry. That is one of the big benefits. And you get the view. It's just, man, it's great to sleep in. You feel secure up there. Comfortable, warm. It definitely, in some kind of way, it definitely beats a ground tent, because it's not just that you're off the ground, because you can sleep in a tent. You just got a feeling of like a more solid living space. It feels more than a tent up there. And then to be able to open up your window in the morning and just look out like that, it is well worth it. All right. So now on to the downsides. And I gotta say, as awesome as this rooftop tent is, there's some serious downsides. Now, first of all, perhaps some of these downsides have to do with the way this rig is set up. But in my experience, putting this thing up and especially taking it down has not been easy. I read, oh, rooftop tents are so easy, they fold up in 60 seconds and you go. I timed myself the other day, and it took me about 17 minutes to fully pack up and put this thing away. But 17 minutes of climbing on the hood, climbing on the roof, going side to side, zipping, tucking, packing. I just find that uncomfortable. It's a lot of freaking hassle and a lot of awkward work to go through just to put up a tent or tear it down. To get where I gotta get, to zip it up, to tuck it all in, it's not easy, not at all. Now, when I had my Gazelle, that was like 60 seconds to pack it up. With this thing, and again, I said perhaps it has to do with the rig. If I had better handles and ladders. If it was my 4Runner, this has rock sliders, so you can't step on them. So the only place you can get up there is to stand on the tires. And there's these parts where I gotta like stretch, and I'm holding on with one hand. And I have done that in the rain a couple of times, and I would go as far as to say it's a liability and quite dangerous. There's been several occasions where I was doing this in the rain with slop all over and almost fell. And it's especially dangerous when you're camping by yourself, middle of nowhere, you fall, you break a bone, you cut yourself. Shouldn't have to do all of that just to pack up your tent. Even a ground tent is far easier and faster. I've taken down dome tents, and that is not a knock to Nomad America, and it's not a knock to this tent company anyway. This tent company is very good. I love this tent. But the whole idea that this is 60 seconds, that's complete bullshit. The other part is being way up in the air. Certainly that has its benefits. As I said, it keeps you warm, keeps you dry, but it also has you high up in the air. And this whole ordeal of climbing down a ladder in the darkness to take a leak, or, you know, just to get something out of the truck, it's kind of a pain in the ass. And again, especially when it happens in storms and there's slop, and, you know, there's a couple nights that I slipped almost coming out of here. And I'm very nimble. You know, I'm not clumsy, but I'm just saying there's a whole awkward maneuver you got to do to get in and out of here, and, you know, especially in bad weather. Being up there, it adds this whole element of complexity. With the ground tent, you can just unzip it, step out, walk 2 feet, grab something, come back. When I gotta unzip this, take my shoes, put it in the bag, go down the ladder, it adds so many more steps just for something that is so simple. All right, another downside is having this giant monstrosity on top of your roof. This rig actually feels a little squirrely when it gets off camber. And, you know, maybe it's the suspension setup. Again, this is not my truck. And again, no knock to Nomad America, great truck, but I don't know if it has to do with the rooftop tent. If you got an extra 150 pounds up there, that just seems to throw off the center of gravity of the truck. Now, I know many people go overlanding and they're doing crazy things with rooftop tents. They're not flipping, but still, for me personally, I just felt the truck feels a little weird in these off-camber situations. You do have that big thing up there. But me personally, I don't know if I would feel comfortable with that. You know, especially back home doing 80 miles an hour in the interstate on some cross-country journey. I don't know. I personally don't feel comfortable with that. And I like having my roof open for smaller gear, things that I can take on and off real quick. Now, that brings me to the other thing. The biggest problem with these tents is, what do you do with that? I mean, I maybe go camping once a month. I cannot see, it would be insane to leave that on my truck full time, driving around with that if I don't have to. You know, driving around with a giant thing up there 80% of the time when I only use it 20% of the time. Okay, so then maybe I need some system to take it on and off. That seems like a hassle in itself because it weighs so much. I would have to get a buddy to come help me take it on and off every time I go camping. That's kind of ridiculous. And the only other solution would be maybe I build, I don't have a garage, but maybe I build some kind of shed things where I can pull under, then put a hoist and lift it on and off the roof to do it by myself. But I mean, all of that for a tent, that just seems like a pain in the ass. So, you know, I don't know what you do. And, you know, people say, well, you get a hard shell. Okay, hard shells are great, but they're like $3,000 or $4,000 for a tent. That is just insane. I paid $11,000 for my trailer. It's a freaking trailer. It holds 4 people. Even that is easier than a rooftop tent because my trailer, I just hitch it up and go. And it goes in the backyard. It has a place to stay. I can throw a cover on it. It's easy. I don't know what to do with this giant thing when I'm not camping. That would be my question. Sorry to interrupt, but when I shot that video in Costa Rica, you know, it was on the fly. I didn't have a script, and there were so many downsides that, honestly, I forgot to mention many of them. So another thing I forgot to mention is the lack of flexibility. I mean, the whole idea that the tent is bolted to the roof
just reduces your flexibility and your your options to camp where you want. Being able to walk down a ravine and go camp somewhere, being able to camp down this trail where vehicles can't fit. It wasn't so much of an issue in Costa Rica, but I could see that being an issue back here at home. Especially in some developed campgrounds and some national parks, there are areas where they have these amazing campsites that you can only walk into. And if you have to sleep in your vehicle or on it, it just limits things. Okay, another issue I had was drying it out. Now, it was the rainy season there in Costa Rica, and it rained pretty much every night. So that was a given. And every morning I woke up and the tent was wet. Certainly that's a reality with all tents. Because the whole damn thing is stuck to my roof, I can't just, shake it off. I can't dry off the top as easily. And with the ground type tent, like I said, you can shake it off, you can pull off the fly, you can wipe some of it with a towel. There's a lot of things you can do to get most of the moisture out of a ground tent. With the rooftop tent, really your only option is to leave it set up for like an hour or two. And that was just a pain in the ass. Another thing that I have to bring up, people are always quick to point out, well, a rooftop tent gets you off the ground and away from predators and wildlife. It's probably important in a place like Africa where there are extreme predators, but in many other places, I just don't think that is big of a factor. I'm not Bear Grylls or some camping expert, but I have done quite a bit of camping, not just in the United States, but in jungles, in Latin America. I've camped in the desert in the Middle East. I've camped in the Amazon twice, Borneo, Thailand, all over Central America. These are places with anacondas, bushmasters, pythons, jaguars, stinging insects that can kill you and paralyze you. And truth be told, in many nights in ground tents and hammocks, I've never had an issue. I have not had a single bug getting anything. I think you can reduce a lot of the risk by keeping a clean camp, zipping things up, keeping food away. Now, what about the big predators? Well, I don't think there's much of an issue as people think. Even here in the United States, grizzly territory, perhaps it can help, but let's also point out that there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of people that go backpacking in these areas and sleep in little two-man tents on the ground and are fine. So the number of bear attacks is extremely minimal. And javelinas and jaguar and mountain lions, all these other things. So, perhaps it can reduce that risk, but that's a very little risk to begin with. So as a result, the selling point of a rooftop tent being keeping me off the ground and safe, I just don't buy it. So finally, let me say, of course, there are some times when a rooftop tent is great, and it is a very good option for some people. If you're a full-time overlander, or if you're going out every damn weekend, then most likely a rooftop tent is a great option. But I'm just speaking as my experience. As a weekend warrior who goes out once a month, I just don't see a rooftop tent as a practical option.
So that is my opinion. Of course, this is only my opinion. Some people are going to have totally different opinion. But what I would say is if you're considering a rooftop tent, I would absolutely go somewhere and rent a rig like this first and try it out for a week, because maybe it is for you, or maybe you're going to find out you don't want to deal with this hassle. So that's